Hello, and welcome to Walking to Urithiru. I'm Overlord Jeebus, and this is part
11.
of my Oathbringer preview analysis. This is full Cosmere spoilers, and we're going to jump straight into the prefaces. Not that they tell us anything. As per usual, I've combined the prefaces of the two chapters that we get that aren't flashback chapters, and so I'm just going to read those out both to you now. However, with a dangerous spice, you can be warned to taste lightly. I would that your lesson may not be as painful as my own. I am no storyteller, to entertain you with whimsical yarns. So this is another week of the epigraph basically telling us nothing. I did see Blightsong pointed out that the mention of spices kind of implies that this is a Vorin male writing this, because obviously Vorin females don't really have spicy food, so they wouldn't really make that kind of connection. So for me, since my top two contenders were Jasnah and Dalinar, I'm going to put Dalinar back at the top, because I still do think it is most likely him. Hopefully next week we'll get 3 non-flashback chapters, and we might actually learn something in those prefaces instead of just constant pointless meandering about words. So jumping into chapter 19, The Subtle Art of Diplomacy. This chapter features our conquering trio are having dinner with Evie's brother in this chapter. This was set 31 years ago, so Dalinar is actually 19 in this chapter, or 19 going on 20. So there's not a huge amount to analyse on a Cosmere-wise scale, but there is a few little things. We get some interesting stuff about Roshar and about how sieges don't really last very long, because obviously they have soulcasters, and soulcasters can produce food as long as they still have emeralds and high storms every couple of days. So sieges are basically pointless in Roshar because they'll never run out of food. And this actually surprises Evie's brother Toe, and what I find weird about this surprising Toe is, as per one of the interludes that we have one of the preview interludes that we've got, it seems that Aimia is where most of the soulcasters came from. I would have thought that soulcasters would have been more common in the west as opposed to the east, but I guess as wealth has just kind of made its way east, so have the soulcasters, I guess, which is one of the reasons that, they also ended up with the most shards. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. We get mentioned that all 10 families, all 10 high princedoms in Alethkar are actually descended from the Sunmaker, not just the Sadeas clan, so that's good. That's interesting. That guy was a busy guy, and he must have had a lot of kids to end up with 10 sons. And the rest of the chapter is just Dalinar being Dalinar. He goes for a walk in the high storm to go fetch his knife. We have a casual mention of a Stormstrider just chilling out. Dalinar flips him off, and then he comes back in, he sits down, and he just takes a drink of the mug that he was carrying with him full of storm water. Quick thing about the Stormstriders, this is not the first time we've seen them. We have actually seen them both in Way of Kings and in Words of Radiance, both time when Kaladin's been trapped in the storms. It does just seem like a common thing that these things are just walking along with the storm wall. The most we know about them is that they have long legs. We don't know if this means that they're kind of like, are they Rosharan with lots of legs, like a giant glowing chasm fiend, or are they like giant people, or do they look more like thunderclasts? We don't really know anything about them other than the fact that they're in the storms and that, Dalinar likes to flip them off. As the chapter continues, we get a bit more of Sadeas and Eli, and I'm actually starting to really like Sadeas and Eli as a couple. Sadeas himself is a scumbag. Eli, she doesn't seem too bad. I might need to go reread Sadeas' point of view chapter from Words of Radiance, because from my perspective, she just seems like a very clever woman, and I'm like, she seems alright. We also then get our first look at Evie, and she's, described as, very frail, blonde, she's not used to the Vorin traditions of the safe hands, that kind of thing. And I would like to say now, at this point, I do not think that Evie is Vivenna. I know a lot of people like to, joke about this, but I'm just like, no, she has a brother, and unless the brother's also from Nalthis, I'm just like, no, I don't see it happening. I don't see Evie being Vivenna. I'm going to fucking eat those words, I can tell you now. And yes, then we end the chapter with an assassin trying to kill Gavilar. Dalinar stops them, kills them with the assassin's knife, then takes the assassin's knife and finishes his meal with the knife and agrees to marry Evie. And that's the end of that chapter. Like I said, not a huge amount to talk about, Moving on to chapter 20, Cords to Bind, we have another chapter of Kaladin hanging out with the Voidbringers, freed Parshman, transformed Parshendi, whatever you want to call them. Here we get a bit about the Parshendi learning that as you gain freedom, that also kind of comes with responsibilities, and, it's not as free as it sounds. Kaladin mentions that he can't see the yellow spren, and this surprises the Parshendi, implying they can all see the yellow spren. And I think Kaladin must be lying here, because he mentions that he saw the yellow spren in the last Kaladin chapter, so he must be lying to them in order to, make it so that the yellow spren thinks he can't see it. maybe? We also have the Parshendi then mention that they can hear the rhythms, but they're not attuning to them, because it must be a cultural thing where it's like, I can hear this beat going on in my head, but they probably hear lots of beats going on in their head because there's so many rhythms, but they haven't been taught to differentiate between them. So it's interesting to know that it is not a physiological thing or a cosmological thing, it is a cultural thing. They are listeners, but they don't know how to listen. Syl mentions she can sense high storms. Now, I don't have a problem with this. I do have a problem with her excuse. Her excuse is essentially, now that this ability is convenient, I suddenly have this ability. And I'm just thinking, like, obviously she gives the excuse that they always had their lists and they always knew when high storms were coming previously. But, like, the way it's kind of shoehorned in there so that this group doesn't get caught up in the storm that's going to be coming in 2 or 3 days. I don't know, it just felt a bit convenient to me. And it makes sense cosmologically. But I'm just kind of like, that was a bit of a shoehorn. And then we end on a kind of interesting perspective on the Radiants and their oaths. They're there to protect people and remember people and stuff like that. But when the Parshendi seem to be people just as much as humans are people, don't those oaths apply to them? It seems this is kind of where the betrayal of the Spren... There's one of the epigraphs, one of the death rattles from Way of Kings kind of implies that the Stormfather betrayed something, and it does seem like there is a Spren listener betrayal, and the Spren are kind of siding with the humans on this, giving them the abilities, and, killing and not protecting Parshendi doesn't break the oaths, even though we also know that the oaths are an individualistic thing where you break the oath if you think you're breaking the oath. It just seems very... it's an interesting quandary. I will be interested to find out how this is resolved. That was chapter 20, and it's chapter 21. I can't believe we're already in chapter 20. This feels like it's flown by for me. Chapter 21 is called Set Up to Fall. And it is Shallan chapter where she wakes up very hungover in the afternoon. And we have Adolin waking her up. And what I found was interesting about this exchange that they have afterwards. They have a few, menstruation jokes and that kind of thing. But what I found was interesting is she just immediately opens up to Adolin about her activities as Vale. I thought that was quite interesting because there's a level of trust there that Shallan has with Adolin, which is either, really nice for their relationship, or is going to completely bite her in the arse. And I'm going to go for the bite her in the arse. We've had too much happy, friendly relationship time, and I don't think it's going to end well. We then also have a little exchange where Shallan realises that they should have run out of Stormlight a long time ago. It's been almost 2 weeks since the last high storm, and so they should be running really low. But they're not, so it seems Stormlight leaks slower when in Urithiru. And to me, I actually think this kind of makes sense. My main theory is that Urithiru is kind of in the cognitive realm a little bit. I don't really know how this works since we've only ever seen black and white transitions between something in the cognitive and something in the physical. But I feel like Urithiru is kind of teetering on the line. And since the Stormlight leaking is kind of a result of that investiture leaking from the spiritual realm into the physical realm, if Urithiru is partly in the cognitive realm, it kind of makes sense that leakage into the physical realm will be slowed because it's not as much in the physical realm, so less is leaking. It kind of makes sense to me that way. We also have mentioned that Shallan is able to not glow when taking in Stormlight, which I immediately just thought, that she's got the Surge of Illumination, she can control how illuminated she is. That just made sense to me, but then a lot of people don't seem to think that this is an illumination thing, that this is actually just this is a general radiant thing, and once you reach a certain level you can stop yourself from glowing. And it could be, but for me, I saw that and immediately my head went, she can control the Surge of Illumination, she has the ability to not glow. It just makes sense in my head. We have mentioned that I kind of should have worked this out last week as well. I thought a high storm signalled the end of the weeping, but turns out that the weeping ended, the rain stopped last Kaladin chapter, and then they're going to have another high storm in 2 or 3 days. I assumed it was 2 weeks of rain, ends on a high storm. Doesn't. So Odium's forces have a few more days before the Radiants get all their Stormlight back. We also hear that there are 2 war camps still in operation on the Shattered Plains, and it does seem like they've survived, but all of their Parshmen have also headed to Dalinar. So, as per usual, Dalinar's status is super fucked. It's also nice to see that Brandon hasn't forgotten about Shallan's guards, so we get a bit of Vather and a bit of Gaz, and a little lesson to Shallan that you can't, if you've got people working for you, people who look up to you, you can't just ignore them, you can't just move them aside because you don't need them anymore. They need to be given things to do, or they're just going to not feel like, they just feel like their job is pointless, and they're not going to be very happy about that. We then get a little bit of Shallan teasing Adolin about being like his father, and also about he's clearly hiding something from her. And I have a feeling she's going to work out. She's going to work out that he killed Sadius. I have a feeling she's going to draw, like how she drew the crew of the ship she and Jasna were on. She drew them, coming back on shore. She drew Ash, destroying paintings. She has the ability to draw things that are happening elsewhere in the world, so I have a feeling that she's going to draw Adolin killing Sadius. There's a lot of ticking time bombs in the Adolin-Shallan relationship, and I just don't think it's going to go down well. They then go to a meeting with Eli Sadius, and she's standing there with Mraize, and I'm just like, ooh boy. There's a few theories flying about. Some that I've seen are, he's working undercover and he's just an assistant of Eli, which would kind of make sense because she's got this massive spy network. We've got that Eli is a ghost blood, and they're working together. We've got somehow Mraize controls Eli in some way that we don't know yet. That he's very controlling. And just at this point, Mraize is a title. Mraize isn't actually his name. So at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if Thydakar is also a title and that Eli is Thydakar. It's probably not very likely just because of the world hopper aspect of the Ghost Bloods, but also Eli it would completely make sense if Eli is in control of the Ghost Bloods. Makes the world feel a little bit smaller, but that's my tentative prediction, is that Eli is Thydakar. I also wouldn't be surprised if it's the Ghost Bloods that have got their hands on Oathbringer, the sword. So I'm really hoping that next week's chapters start with a Shallan chapter, because boy, I really want to find out what goes on there. But that's it for this week. Thank you for joining me. As per usual, leave a comment down below. You can shoot me a message on the Discord, on 17th Shard, on Reddit, and thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time where we can continue walking to Urithiru. Bye!